Now entering the Squared Circle pit, the newest member of the Bullet Club. I'm so excited. El Phantasmo, thank you so much for coming on Metal Injection Squared Circle pit.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, man.
Now it's been a crazy couple of months for you, I assume. You made your debut in New Japan. I'm going to be completely frank. I wasn't too familiar with you before that. I have seen you on a few Rev Pro shows, but I imagine like it must have like overnight you were like, whoa, the amount of attention you got, especially with your performance in the Super Junior tournament, might have been a little overwhelming.
Yeah, man. It's something you hear about. When you make that big jump, you don't really expect it, but like the social media numbers like doubled. Still to this day, is still constantly growing. But I mean, it's something that we've wanted to do ever since we started wrestling, as any wrestler does. So, I'm just happy that it's happening.
And I really dug the entrance and like the whole presentation. It was very cool. And I noticed that when you came out, you altered the Bullet Club design to say Headbanger Club.
Yeah.
And that caught my attention, of course, because being running a metal website, I consider myself a headbanger, so that's very cool. So you enjoy heavy metal as well as pro wrestling.
Oh yeah, man. I love everything that's hard and heavy. I started doing the headbang thing like back in 2012. I would come out to like an Alice in Chains remix. Then I switched over to like the dubstep heavy headbang and stuff. And it's stuck. No one else is doing it in wrestling, so it's become my thing. And when they said I was joining Bullet Club, you've seen the Buffet Club and every sort of Bullet Club ripoff. I was like, what can I do? I was like, well, it's Headbang Club. But the headbang was kind of like too long on the t-shirt, so we just took out the vowels and here we are. But yeah, I love metal, man.
That's cool. So what drew you in first? Was it music or pro wrestling?
Definitely music. I remember the first album that really switched me to the metal music was the Black Album by Metallica. I remember my dad had a bookshelf full of CDs, and I'd listened to Bruce Springsteen. But I remember putting that Metallica album on for the first time, and it's got that Egyptian sounding song. I don't remember what it's called, but like that album, I was like, oh, what's this? And ever since then, I've been gravitated toward everything loud, hard, and heavy.
Yeah, I like that. And it's interesting that when you say loud, hard, and heavy, for you, that isn't only constricted to heavy metal, like you mentioned, dub and like harder electronic as well, right?
Oh yeah, like I love that stuff. And I mean, you go to a dubstep show, there's some of the craziest mosh pits compared to any metal show that I've been to. Those DJs are playing all about the energy, and when they drop that bass, the crowd goes wild, and you get the bros in the middle just bashing each other. It's great.
That's cool. So what are some other bands other than Metallica and Alice in Chains, as you mentioned, that you over time became a big fan of?
I'm a big metalcore guy. I think back in high school, I started getting into new metal. So like I remember the first time I heard Static X, I was blown away, and then I found Hatebreed, and then I found Parkway Drive, and then August Burns Red, and then you start finding the underground bands like Motograder and stuff. Just that stuff I just love.
That's so like something with a little more of an industrial tinge too, which kind of gets back to the electronic stuff. You like some fake drums in your heavy metal sometimes.
Of course. I also love Black Label Society and those Amon Amarth Viking metal. There's so many subgenres of metal that you can just dive into. It's great. Like even Nickelback has some good heavy songs. Like, I know everyone loves to hate Nickelback and stuff, but they've got some bangers.
And I mean, you're from Vancouver, so you're supposed to say something nice about Nickelback. So
yeah, the
it's
Canadian
excusable.
boys, man. Chad Kroeger dated Avril Lavigne. Like that's pretty respectable. So, I definitely hate some of their songs too. So they're not all that good. But yeah, hell yeah to Nickelback.
So how did you end up from going from Vancouver? Like, how did you end up in the British wrestling scene, uh, starting out in Canada?
Yeah, my wrestling career is kind of troubled. Wrestling in Canada, you only would do it once or twice a month. It's not a big scene out there. There's just the local guys. So it's always been known that you have to leave Vancouver to get noticed. And I was in
Actually,
a
to just take a step back, like, when did you start training? Like, what was your impetus?
I started in 2005. Um, the funny thing is, I never planned on being a wrestler, which was always interesting. I always wanted to go to film school and make movies. So when I graduated high school, I went straight to the Art Institute of Vancouver and took a digital film and video course. And it just so happened I had to do a project on an actual company and like make like a fake corporate video for them. And one of my best friends from high school, Artemis Spencer, wrestled all throughout high school. And I always thought it was cool, I liked Raw as a kid and the Attitude Era and stuff, but I never like saw myself as a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So I did this project on the local wrestling company in Vancouver, and I was filming the training class, and I was like, oh man, this looks like so much fun. When I thought about it, I was like, I've always loved theater in high school, and I've always loved PE class. So it's basically improv and gym class together. So I started low key just wrestling training in the background while I was doing film school, and then just stuck with it. And then like the wrestling disease has just took over, and wrestling's all I could think about.
So, like you mentioned, you were a fan of the Attitude Era and everything. Did you kind of fall out of wrestling, and then kind of when you had this film assignment, it reminded you that like, oh, this is fun? Is that kind of how it happened?
Yeah, I guess so. I always like watching Raw. Being in Canada, we didn't get Nitro
Mm-hmm.
like at the same time, so I never really watched WCW, but we did get ECW on TNN, and watching that was like I was like, holy shit, this rules! Like
Yeah.
RVD and Tajiri, like the Mike Awesome power bombing people off the top rope through tables, like the atmosphere of the crowd. I was like, this is crazy. But yeah, then life goes on and Raw wasn't that interesting and you kind of fall out of it and then you get back into wrestling and then I remember getting a DVD when we were training that was called The Way Wrestling Should Be, and it was our trainer burned a bunch of Japanese matches like Kobashi and Kawada and Misawa, things you've never even heard of, you didn't know existed. So when you're starting out wrestling, you watch these like epic 45-minute Tokyo Dome matches. You're like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing.
Yeah, I had the same reaction too in the mid 2000s. Like, WWE was not at its best, and I was falling out of love with wrestling. And I wasn't training to be a wrestler, but I did have a friend that was on like IRC, so he was exposed to the Japanese wrestling scene, and he sat me down and kind of we watched some of those matches, and I was just be like, these people's necks, what do they do with their necks?
Oh,
you
you
know,
still you still think that watching Ibushi and Naito just literally kill each other.
oh, I know,
Boys,
I
what are you
know.
doing?
uh, yeah, and so it must have been crazy to go from that to now wrestling in some of these arenas with New Japan. But now to go back to my original question was, yeah, how did you end up in the UK scene? And then we'll get to Japan in a moment.
Yeah, right. So yeah, being in the black hole of the Pacific Northwest, you kind of got to get your name out there. And I trained in a class with Kyle O'Reilly and the Bollywood boys who are now in the WWE system. So Kyle went to St. Louis and trained with a couple guys, Davey Richards and Tony Kazina. Uh, and I finished up my cartoon editing job, and I went to go live with them and train with them and do the Ring of Honor stuff. But I got caught at the U.S. border, and they refused entry, thinking I was going to be a suspected illegal immigrant. So that kind of derailed my whole wrestling career. Really soured me out on wrestling. Like I think I
Hmm.
took 6 months off wrestling just to fall back in love with it, and then I had a motorcycle crash that took me out for a year. So I've had a lot of like starts and goes, but I turned 30, and it was kind of like it was a now or never option in my head, where if I don't pursue wrestling now, I'm never going to, and I'm going to be stuck at this desk job for the rest of my life. And it's all about timing. The UK wrestling scene was on fire. They had Fight Club Pro, they had Rev Pro, they had Progress, and I just decided that I wasn't going to renew my job, and I was just going to move to England and see what happens, because I knew if I didn't, I would regret it for the rest of my life.
Did you know people in the scene, or you kind of just went to England cold?
Yeah. Like Kyle was a saint. He hooked me up with Andy at Rev Pro, and got me that first booking in the UK. But after that, I had nothing. Like, I didn't have a place to stay for the first 2 months I was here. I was bouncing around Airbnbs. I had one match the first 6 weeks I was in England. It was tough. It was real tough. But now that I've been here for 2 years, I've made some friends for life of guys who are going through the same thing I'm going through.
So you were in the British system for like a little over a year before New Japan made the call. Like, how did it happen so quickly?
Yeah, I just got lucky. RevPro had the ties with New Japan. Progress has the ties with NXT, UK, WWE, and I've always been a RevPro guy. So I think it was last summer they booked 2 shows with New Japan talent. Super Strong Style Evolved. I wasn't on the first night, but I was lucky enough to be on the second night in a 4-way with myself, David Starr, who I was feuding with. We got put in there with Tiger Mask and Taiji Ishimori, who, funny enough, is now my tag team partner, IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship co-holder, however you want to say that. But yeah, so it was that match. I asked Gato to watch. I mean, he watches every match anyways. I went into Manchester literally as an unknown, and by the end of the show, people were chanting my name just as loud as Okada. So I think that kind of opened up their eyes, and that's when they first got in touch. But that was it was like July, August, and nothing really with New Japan until this May.
So you didn't hear from them at all, and then they just called you, like, "Hey, you want to be a part of this tournament?" Was that kind of how it went?
Kind of. So I did that first show, and then I got booked in the British J Cup, where they brought in some New Japan dudes. So I wrestled Jushin Thunder Liger in the second round, and then I wrestled Rocky and Kushida in the finals, where I won. And Liger sent out a tweet on his flip phone about me. I think it was putting me over. I don't know. It was all in Japanese. And it was after that I started getting booked against Rocky Romero and then El Desperado, and then it was around that time they're like, "Oh, we're interested in bringing you in for 3 months for this year."
Yeah, I feel like the Rocky Romero match was probably like an audition for you. He's basically like working backstage, right? Like they were like, "Can this guy?"
He's the guy that brings in all the gaijins in New Japan, man. Like Rocky's the man. That's why I'm so lucky that we had our Super Junior match that was so well received.
That was it was so, like, he was like the sleeper story of the tournament. Like, obviously there was the main stuff with you and Ospreay and Shingo, like those stories, but like it's so crazy how he got the crowd behind him throughout the whole thing. And the match with you was just like how you guys worked the crowd. It was so fun.
Yeah, that was man. Honestly, we didn't expect that when we went out there. It's just those little stories in wrestling that you don't think about until after it happens. And I was this super asshole undefeated dude against Rocky's the part-time commentator wrestler and his first main event or whatever it was, and how it was the final couple minutes of the time limit and stuff. It's that wrestling magic that you can't plan, you can't predict. It just happens. Crowd crazy, the commentators cheering for Rocky so much, like the anti-hero, everything just clicked, and I was happy to share that with him because he's been nothing but fantastic for getting me into New Japan. And so back to that question, yeah, he was definitely a tryout match. I think the making Liger look so good in the J Cup was a tryout match. Having another good match with Desperado was, I just kept nailing these little auditions with New Japan out of the park.
Yeah. But like that must have been why, like you said, you're seeing these Japanese matches, and you had, I'm sure you saw Liger matches as you were training, and then to actually like, I saw like I've been very lucky. Like this year, I saw him maybe like 4 times. He was here WrestleMania weekend. I went to Dallas, and every time I see him, like I don't know what it is, I get like choked up. Like this is so like this guy's a legend, and I'm seeing him live right before he retired. Like, what did it feel like to see on the paper, your name up against Liger? Like that must have been mind blowing.
It's crazy. But you have to play it cool. It's one of those things where you're like, I don't really want to go ask him for a picture. Like I don't ask anybody for a picture. I'm not like a photo selfie guy, but you're like, holy shit, I'm tagging with Jushin Thunder Liger. Like, please, can we get like a dope ass selfie? Because that's once in a lifetime thing. And actually, he's like an actual living legend, which is so rare in this world that you're like, you just look at him like, holy fuck, like the things that this guy's done in his career is mind blowing. And he's still going. He's, before New Japan, we all kind of like warm up and get loose, and he's repping out 225 pounds on bench press like it's nothing. He's 50 plus years old. You're just like, dude, wow. Insane.
Yeah, that's wild. And then, so the Super Junior tournament this year, it was a round robin. So it's kind of like the G1, but with the Super Juniors. And to me, I feel like that's a really big test of how good of a wrestler you are, because you are wrestling every day and all of your matches are being streamed. So people are seeing you work, 12 days in a row or whatever it was. So you can't exactly just have the same match every day. You have to come up with something new every day. Do you feel like you grew from the challenge? What was it like to be in the trenches?
It's great. Like throw me in the deep end right away. It's getting into a swimming pool. I don't like stepping my toes in, slowly getting in because it's so cold. I hate cold water. You just got to jump in, and might as well do a flip to impress the girls that are at the pool too. But it's the same. It's the same thing in wrestling. Just throw me in the deep end and see what happens. But the craziest thing of when I look back that I don't think many people think about is I've been a baby face for like the last 6 years of my career. And soon as I got to New Japan, I had to turn heel. I literally didn't have any matches from the indies until New Japan where I got to turn or practice, switching it up. Like I kind of think of it's like it's being a defenseman in hockey your whole life, and then you get drafted into the NHL as a forward. You still know how to play the game, but it's something you've been working on as one thing for so long that all of a sudden you have to switch it on the biggest stage that you've ever been to was crazy. So the fact that I got heat so fast and I could switch it so easily, I'm still struggling trying to like change your move set to become a bad guy. Like I've built my own move set up as being a good guy, to now have to switch it to being a bad guy is pretty tough. That I'm still working on, but.
And like what I assume you mean by that is like as a face, you want to pop the crowd, you want to get them excited about your moveset, but as a bad guy, you don't necessarily want to give the crowd what they want, right? Like that's kind of
exactly. If I'm doing cooler things than my opponents, it's going to be a lot harder to get the crowd to cheer for them than it is over me. So like I built my whole career on doing rope walk moonsaults to the floor, crazy dives or these flipping Canadian destroyers and stuff. And now that you're the villain, it's completely different. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and you were like learning on the job. Was there ever an instance where you're trying to like work out a match beforehand, and then you kind of stop yourself and go like, no, that's like I shouldn't have that sort of shine in this kind of match. Like that should leave that for my opponent.
The one match against Ospreay was interesting because that was my first Korakuen Hall. It was in the main event, and I ended up beating Ospreay, which I don't know how many people debut in Korakuen in the main event and then win. So I think that's pretty crazy. But I did the giant backflip off the stairwell over the stairs onto him, and I'm like,
yeah, it was nuts.
And you get there, you're like, holy shit, like that's actually pretty far. Like it's got to be like a 10-foot gap. And you're looking down, you're like, if I don't make this, I'm going to face plant down the stairs. If I go too fast, I'm going to fly into the chairs behind us. But that was something where I was like, I don't like, should I do this? Like I'm trying to become this bad guy, but then also you're in the main event of Cork and Hall in your debut in the Super Juniors, and if no one else can do the backflip off the stairwell, you gotta do it.
So did you did you do one for good luck, or you just eyed it and were like, I could
Ah,
get it?
man, there's no way you could practice that.
Yeah.
Like
I
I've seen the gifs of people doing it before. So someone like gave the idea to me before the show. But then when I first got to Cork and Hall and I got up on that stairwell and I looked down, I was like, that is a lot farther than the camera would perceive it to be. But no,
yeah.
it's one of those things you can never practice that. Like I've done walking on the top of the cage, doing a splash off that, backflips off cages, like all your ladder things. You're like, there's no way you can practice that thing. You just got to trust yourself, and when you're in the moment, just not think about anything else. Like honestly, all the crazy high spots that I've done have not been practiced before. You just got to have that adrenaline and go out there and do it.
Yeah, I believe that completely. I would not have the the chutzpah to pull any of that stuff off. But so like also, some of these exchanges, like they're so fast and like so intricate. You do a move, they do a move, you got to duck. They do a spinning roundhouse, you got to like. Do you plan out all of that, or is that also like a bit of improv where you're just looking? It's like a dance where you kind of respond to however your opponent is moving. Is it a combination of both? I was always wondering how those fast exchanges are created.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of both. I mean, when you think about what wrestling is, you get to the show, you have 2 hours before you go out to perform to talk about your opponent. You got to think about his moves. You got to think about your moves. You got to come up with choreography on the spot, and then you have to try and memorize it. Then you got to try and think about it working. And then you got to go out there and remember it, and then doing it. And then when you're out there, the bright lights, the loud roar of the crowd. If you forget one thing, then all of a sudden, you can't remember what's coming up next, and you just got to do things. And that's where I say that wrestling magic comes in, where you can't plan things working out so good that you go out there, something will misstep, but then it works out better. And I don't know what it is, but there's definitely a magic in pro wrestling when you go out there and do those kind of things, because there's no way you can do these Tony Jaa choreographed sequences and remember it perfectly with another 25 minutes of moves after that, when you only had 2 hours to plan it before. Like it's actually crazy how difficult pro wrestling is when you like analyze it from from a performer's perspective. That you can sit there and watch it as a fan, but to actually think about, oh, that guy was on a train for 6 hours and he got to the venue, warmed up, had an hour to go over the match with someone, then he had to memorize it, and he had to get up and warm up and then go out there and do it. It's crazy.
I'm glad you say that, because I that's something I think about all the time, like especially on these shows where it's like one show a day. Like you gotta finish up, get to the next venue and just do it over again and come up with another incredible match. And with the Super Junior specifically, I feel like you guys are working at like double speed, because there's so many more like moves per minute, like if you were to do an analysis, like just really break it down like scientifically, that it's overwhelming probably sometimes.
Oh, for sure. And you also got a couple on the fact that you're sore, you're battered, you're sleeping on these Japanese hotel beds that are literally bricks. Like I've never slept in such hard beds as Japanese hotels. So you go batter yourself, and then you get on the bus, you go to the hotel, and you sleep on a brick, and then you got to do it over again for the next 4 weeks. It's crazy.
And like, do you try to like all right, I have Osprey today, I have Romero in 2 days, like do you save spots for like 2 days from now, or are you just thinking about the next show? Yeah, you do.
No, that's you kind of look at your schedule and you look at your move set, and you think about when you could have special moments with special people. Like if I do my New Japan finisher is called the CR2, which I blatantly stole off Milano Collection AT. You do that to all the top guys, but then if you can beat someone else with a secondary move, to use that as a falsie for the next match the next night, or if you use I think I did low blow small package for a couple wins, and then the next time you do that, someone kicks out. It's that whole
Right.
tournament storytelling that when you get to the finals and you're doing things that people have seen as the finish, and then you switch it and then you get them as a false finish. So there's lots of little things that you can think about over the course of a tournament. That's really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool to hear like that side of it because, right, you can play off a story that you told the night before to tell a new story to show
Exactly.
that your opponent's paying attention to what you're doing and all that.
Exactly. When Rocky Romero worked my arm the whole match of ours, and then he tapped me out, then the next show, I was like, oh, well, now my arm's actually sore, so I'm actually gonna wrap it up, and then we can tell that story about Yo going after my arm, but Yo and Rocky are in the same faction, so now I'm gonna be mad at him because I lost to Rocky, and then he surprises me with there's all those little storytelling nuances that I think really makes New Japan so great.
Yeah, and it's great. Like I'm still blown away that you're saying that this is your first performance as a heel because I did see the Strong Style Evolve shows last year, but I would say, like I said, this was my first real exposure to you, especially as a singles guy in singles matches, and it just seemed like it came so naturally to you to be a cocky heel that like everybody likes.
To be perfectly honest, that is me in real life. I don't have to pretend to be a good guy anymore, which is the biggest blessing. Having to fake a smile, meeting the fans, and sign autographs and do all that merch thing is the worst when I'm actually a naturally cocky dickhead. That I don't know how Gato saw it, but the two brief interactions I had before him, I think he saw that in me and decided to go that route, and it works out. But I think the first match in the Super Juniors, I wrestled Bandito and I gave the baby the middle finger. That's something I had no idea that was going to happen. It's just in that very moment when you're in that performer's mindset. I just saw a baby, went for a high five, and I was like, oh no, wait, I'm not a good guy. Fuck you, baby. And, just took off from there. And I'm walking, someone's got their hat dangling in front of me. I was like, oh, I'm just going to toss it, see what happens. And then it becomes a thing that there's no way you could predict that's what's going to get over. You just got to go out there and get lucky. And, being a natural dickhead really helps, I think.
You had a lot of big matches, but I think the biggest match was when you were sharing the ring with one of the toughest opponents in New Japan, Toru Yano, because you never know how he's gonna try to get you. And I feel like how cool was that to get to work with his style of which is completely the antithesis to what you're like the work rate, but more so of the psychological stuff.
See, deep down, I am the laziest wrestler you've ever met. I love comedy wrestling. I love bants and banter. That's why I love the UK indie scene. We do 4 shows a week. That in Attack Pro Wrestling, I had a storyline where I was hunting for Bigfoot and stuff. And I'm always searching for Bigfoot, crawling under the ring, calling Bigfoot. Then he shows up 6 months later, and then we have a hardcore match. It's the most absurd, wacky things in pro wrestling that I love. I love doing slow-mo wrestling, where I just all of a sudden just start moving in slow-mo, and then the entire crowd starts chanting really slow. I love that stuff. So to be able to go do it with a master like Yano in New Japan, I was marking out more than I was to wrestle Ospreay.
I believe it. Yeah, he I think is really underrated, and I feel like his G1 matches are some of the most interesting ones because you just don't know how it ends. It's going to be quick and over before you know it, and that's what I love about it. It's completely different than everything else on the show.
Yeah, that's what makes it great, because you can't have strong style, hard hitting, fighting spirit matches 5 times in a row the whole tournament. You need a guy to break it up, and you need to give those guys something different to work with. And the fact that he's so good, he makes his matches so entertaining, makes it work so much better.
Do you have a wish list of guys in New Japan that you want to work with, like people you want to share the ring with?
I mean, obviously Okada is the man, and to be able to wrestle him would be the biggest test of my life, because he's one of the best pro wrestlers. So to be able to go in there and just try and hang at his pace would be something that I would love. Yeah. The last Kazuna Road tour, I was lucky to be in 8-mans with Tanahashi. You know, it was another legend that I would love to go. But I think those heavyweight dudes are a little bit of ways. I'm really wanting to focus on the junior division, and you know, the junior tag division has been lacking for a little while. People say a lot, so it would be really cool to be one of those key players that help bring it back up and really raise the junior division. You know, Ospreay wants to main event Wrestle Kingdom as a junior. You know, to be one of those guys to get the juniors to that level would be the ultimate goal.
He does need an opponent, so
yeah, I beat him twice. I haven't got my I got my rematch, but you know, I keep poking at Liger. I mean, if I could retire Liger at Wrestle Kingdom, I think that would be career defining. You know, if he even steps up to me before, and I could retire Liger before he gets to Wrestle Kingdom, I think that would be even better.
Yeah, to be known as the guy that kept Liger away from his final Wrestle Kingdom.
Huge. The nuclear heat would be unregisterable.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask about, like you mentioned, you did graphic design and you designed your Headbanger Club shirt, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think that's. Go ahead.
No, I just cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I used, I love Photoshop. I self-taught myself years ago. Back when I was in Vancouver, I would do all the show posters.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is like, how did you develop it over time?
Yeah, just the creative outlet of making your own T-shirts that you would want to wear over time, and making the posters that look better than any other wrestling poster out there. And,
did you find that, like, before you even picked it up, like you would look at posters and be like, oh, like you would start critiquing it and judge like typography and all that, and be like, wait, maybe I should just do this.
Oh, for sure. Even when you look at some of the dudes' T-shirts that they release these days, you have to bite your tongue because the logo, the O and N are clearly like off center and out of space compared to the other side. And you're like, oh, like, you know, I'm such a pixel perfect kind of guy that all my designs, like I did a Megadeth, a Rust Them All that I had one of my friends draw up for me, but I completely like altered what he did so it satisfied what I wanted, and then I added all textures and then the gradients, and then like literally zoom in at like 500% to make sure every line and every dot is pixel perfect. You know, it's one of those like perfectionist kind of things, OCD. But, you know, it's a brand that you represent for yourself. So, you know, I want to put out some of the best stuff available. You know, a guy that I look up to, Chris Brooks, who does all the CCK and Schadenfreude and stuff. You know, his merch game is next level, and he's really brought up everybody in the UK to have better T-shirts. I mean, some of these bigger Fight Club shows that you do, you literally look at the merch spread. You're like, this is comparable to high-end metal show merch stands. You know, there's WWE is not putting out better T-shirts than some of the dudes on the indies. And you know,
did you, like, growing up, did you find yourself inspired or influenced by like WWE graphics? Because I feel like for me, like I also did graphic design and went to school for it. Like early like wrestling logos were so cool, and like I would draw them, and that was kind of like my first like dabbling with graphic design, was just trying to recreate their logos. Did you have a similar experience?
Now that I think about it, I remember loving like the matchup screens for pay-per-views.
Yes.
So whenever they would like the way the wrestlers would move and then freeze, and then how the backgrounds would move, you know, that's what got me into After Effects and Photoshop, that I would cut out the pictures and then make the background and then animate it in 3D space. And I was like, how do I make this look cool? And I remember always watching the pay-per-views. I was like, I don't really care about the matches, but show me the match graphics and like how the backlash looked, and then how a Great American Bash looked. And even to these days, like the crazy 3D backgrounds WWE using is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty next level nowadays. But yeah, it had its own little charm back in the day. I agree with you. And I would always look forward to, like, same as you, like the control center where like they go over the lineup to the next show, because like I wanted to see how everyone looked in those like Mortal Kombat match graphics.
Oh, exactly. Those are still to my day some of like my favorite things that I love seeing. And you know, a lot of the times in the UK wrestling scene, you won't know your match until the graphic is announced, which is mind blowing. So you're like, oh, when the fans find out, you find out who you're wrestling. But you know, it's cool seeing those matchup screens and how some of them look really cool, and then some of them look really shitty. But
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking some time. When can we expect you back in New Japan, and what other wrestling shows do you have coming up in the future?
yeah, I'm just finishing up my UK indie dates. I got Fight Club, Wrestling League, TNT, and then a couple Rev Pro shows, and then I think we hop over to the States to do Seattle, San Francisco, LA for the Super J Cup, which I'm pretty
That's right.
excited about. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what roster's going over there and who they've got in that. I think seen a couple preview graphics with the Mystico dude.
Yeah, Caristico. I saw. Yeah, yeah.
That's dope.
I was
You
in
know,
Dallas and they gave me a flyer for it, and yeah, it was you. You were on it. Ishimori, Osprey, Sho and Yo, Caristico, and I believe Dragon Lee.
yeah, yeah. So
So
that's going to
that's
be great. I mean, I think they're going to finish G1 and then kind of go towards that. But I mean, if it's the best of the best of Super Juniors this year, that's going to be mind blowing. That's going to be my first time wrestling on the West Coast in the States. Then we come back to the Copper Box for Royal Quest. That's in London. We've got like York Hall on the Friday, Copper Box on the Saturday, Cockpit on the Sunday, and then September back to Japan. But I don't
Do
really
you know
know.
if you're going to be on that East Coast run that they're doing in late September? Have you?
Oh God, my fingers are crossed. My toes are crossed. The Hammerstein Ballroom is the number one venue that I want to wrestle
Oh,
in the
really?
world. Oh yeah, it goes back to those ECW days. You know, more than the
Yeah.
ECW arena, the Hammerstein Ballroom. Watching the ECW One Night Stand, it's the most aesthetic, visually looking wrestling venue I think there is out there.
Mhm.
You know, I think
Yeah, and that's
think
crazy
that's
that you said. Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many shows there. Like, I'm so, like, I'm beyond excited for New Japan to come here to New York. That's where I'm based, and yeah, like that's going to be a crazy show in that venue too.
yeah. I'm my fingers are crossed. You know, I don't think I'll hear about that for a while, but you know,
Right? Yeah,
that's the literal dream. The only reason I'd want to go to Ring of Honor is to do the Hammerstein Ballroom. But if New Japan's going to do that, I think the amount of people that would go to a New Japan show in the Hammerstein Ballroom would be ECW level. And you know, oh, dude, I want on that so bad.
yeah, that's going to be a sell. And they're doing the ECW arena the next night, which I'm kind of like, should I drive down to Philly? I think I might.
Which also would be insane and crazy to do. You know,
Yeah.
the setup that they had for the Evolve show there was fantastic. So, you know, imagine Okada versus, you know, Kenta in the ECW arena. Like what?
Yeah, that would
That'd
be.
be unreal.
Well, it's cool to hear that you're still a fan. The jadedness hasn't hit you too hard just yet.
Oh no, it definitely has. Don't worry about that.
Okay, I got
There's definitely some things in wrestling that make you excited for that that reminds you of your love and passion for it. But there's definitely some things in wrestling that really remind you of how much you hate it too. So you know, yin and yang.
it. Well, that we'll have to get into a whole separate interview about all the things you hate about wrestling. That could be further into your
Ooh, that'd
heel
be
run.
a 2 hour podcast, brother.
It'd be interesting to know that people need to know the darker side of the things you don't see.
Yeah, I mean they had that Vice documentary
Oh yeah,
series.
Dark Side of the Ring. That's right.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those. Those were great. I love Vice. You know, they're great. Everything they do, top notch. So the fact that they're covering wrestling in such like a well produced TV series is great.
Yeah, they did a new another series after called The Wrestlers, where they kind of follow around these different promotions. They have this one where they followed Gabe Sapolsky for a day, and saw how he works, and they went to Stardom and
Yeah, I
did a
saw
whole
I saw the
profile on
Stardom
it.
one for sure.
Yeah,
Found that one on YouTube, but yeah, so that's
yeah, that
great.
was cool. Awesome, man. Well, El Phantasmo, thank you so much once again. If you do you have a social media situation that you'd like to plug, or
Yeah,
are
I've just
you
got Twitter and Instagram at ELP Wrestling.
boom? There you go. Follow him. Thank you, dude, and good luck in the Super J Cup.
Hey man, thanks for having me. Hope to see you on the East Coast.
Yeah,
If
hopefully we'll
not,
see each other in New York.
devil horns up. Devil horns up. Devil horns up.